Welcome to For the Love of Books, a podcast by Lanarkshire Libraries. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Lanarkshire Libraries podcast For the Love of Books. My name is Chris Wilson, the E-Services Librarian, and today's episode I'm going to be joined by a very special guest because today we have got the author David Macphail joining us to tell us a little bit about his books and also tell us about his latest writing, which is an atlas full of fantastic facts of Scotland. And David has got a great back catalogue of books, including some adventures with Thorfinn, the nicest Viking, and he has also got a series of books written about the Top-Secret Grandad as well. And he has kind of moved on to writing this atlas as well, full of facts, and it's a great book. If you haven't seen it yet, do pick it up whenever you get a chance, and you'll find some fantastic facts. Even if for adults and children, it's a great book, so do have a look at it. And David is going to tell us a little bit more about all that and more in our little interview that I had with him earlier on today. So, David, thank you for joining me on our podcast today. It's a great pleasure to have you on it.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, and we have met before because I don't know if you remember, you did an event for us at View Park Library a long time ago.
Yes.
And from that, it's one of my most prized possessions. This came from that, the Thorfinn and the Rotten Scots, and you signed it for my son before he was born, and you were actually the first person ever that I told what his name was going to be. So you you signed it with his name. So that's a kind of wee memory that I have of meeting you.
That's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
That's actually made my day. That's like being part of someone else's life in some way, and in a really cool way. I love that.
It's the book. I've still got the book. I've got it here, and it's a proud possession. And now he's kind of getting to that point where he's starting to kind of learn to read at school and stuff like that. So we're going to be kind of venturing out a little bit and kind of getting him to kind of visit the Thorfinn adventures, I think, over the next little while, because they're fantastic books, which we'll find out a little bit more about. And later on with some of the questions, but that's my kind of little kind of memory of meeting you, and which is a kind of little sort of personal thing I think I'll always remember actually from
fabulous. Yeah, no, I remember
it. Fantastic. So before we get on to more about your writing, I thought we'd find out a little bit more about you, because in the back of that book there's a fantastic little bio about you, and it starts off by telling that you went travelling at the age of 18. That must have been quite a bit of an adventure, going out and travelling the world at the age of 18.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was very clear on what I wanted to do when I was about 13 or 14. I wanted to go off and have adventures. And I have, in a very naive way. I mean, we had this program that I used to watch back in like the 1980s when I was a kid, and it was called The Incredible Hulk. I don't know if you ever remember it. It wasn't like the Marvel Incredible Hulk where it's all CGI'd. Basically, they just got this big guy called Lou Ferrigno, who was like a wrestler or a bodybuilder or something, and they just painted him green, and he was the Incredible Hulk. And then basically Bruce Banner just goes round every week having adventures, and it was kind of like a kind of superhero version of The Littlest Hobo or something like that, Basically every week he would go and have adventures and save people from money lenders, or sort out a local crime boss. And I genuinely thought if I went out traveling, then life could be like that. I go out and have adventers and stuff. And
please tell me you didn't take any green paint with you, though.
I didn't take any green paint. I possibly should have done. So I went out and I did a lot of travel. As soon as I turned 18 and I was old enough, I just went off to Australia, and I worked around there because you can get working visas. You still get them. So I was working around Australia for about a year and traveling around, and I went to all sorts of other places. Like I worked in a kibbutz for a while. And it was great fun. It was a sort of life-shaping experience, mainly through all the misadventures I had more than anything.
Yeah, I think it must be something that would really kind of shape you as a person, being able to kind of experience all that at such a young age as well and things. And one of the things that caught my eye as well was it used to be a ghost tour guide. And I have to ask, did you encounter any ghosts on your ghost tours?
Oh, interesting one. You know, I always go at these things with a very open mind. I've loved ghost stories from when I was a kid, very atmospheric ghost stories. But
Yeah.
in full truth be told, I never really believed that there were any ghosts. So I took this job, and I have to say it was the best job I ever had. Like, even better than being a writer, it's being a ghost tour guide, going around haunted places, telling people stories. It was brilliant. And it was really something. The funny thing was, though, even though I didn't quite believe in it all, these weird things started happening when I started work on the ghost tours. All the alleged paranormal activity went through the roof, and the
Yeah.
tour bosses couldn't believe it. I ended up in the Edinburgh Evening News one night because of like all the things that were happening. I mean, there were people passing out, people fainting. There were people coming up at the end going, "I got my hair. I've got these weird marks, bruises, and scratches and stuff like that." And I'm like, I didn't understand where any of it was coming from. I mean, I didn't believe in ghosts. I was just there telling stories in haunted places.
Yeah.
So maybe it all came down to the power of suggestion. I don't know, and the storytelling
Yeah,
coming out.
possibly. Yeah, I mean, one of our libraries, Airdrie Library, had a visit from I don't know what you would call them, but it was like people who can investigate ghosts and stuff like that. One evening,
Oh,
and they came out and kind of like sort of spent a lot of time searching around the libraries and stuff like that, and trying to see if there was anything there. I don't think they found anything, but I think there was a few, like you say, like kind of sort of spooky things happened while they visited and stuff like that.
ah.
So whether there's anything there or not, I don't know, but. I do think that sometimes that kind of suggestion in your head can sort of maybe highlights it a little bit more than you might usually.
Oh, it does. You take people into a haunted place or a place that you're telling them is haunted, usually a tomb or a very dark, dark underground spot, which is cold anyway, and full of weird drafts and breezes. And you start telling stories, and the hair starts creeping up at the back of their necks, and then all of a sudden they're imagining things. And
Yeah,
I do think the power of suggestion must have had something to do with it. But I mean, I never personally witnessed anything. The most frightened I probably got was when our jumper router jumped out and he got his timing wrong and he screamed and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Yeah.
Ah, yeah, fantastic. So, yeah, it's certainly something that I think that there's question marks about. I think about over whether they're there or not, but I don't think anyone really ever knows the full answer. So we'll leave it up to everyone's own minds to decide whether the ghosts are real or not. So, but now you are a well-known writer on your own right, but you have been following in the footsteps of a very well-known mother as well, and Cathy Macphail. A lot of people will know her books and things like that. I'm guessing she probably was quite a big influence in you getting started writing in the first place.
Oh, huge. Absolutely. I mean, I grew up writing at my mum's knee even before she started getting books published. We were both really, really interested in writing. We used to write little scripts together and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And so she was like my main inspiration. Without her, would I have become a writer? I mean, I don't know. Um,
that's,
I doubt it somehow. But what really interests me though is not what influenced me; it's what influenced her. You see, my mum
yeah,
was born and bred in Greenock in the 1950s, going into the 60s. Literally, no one around her had like been to university or was interested in writing or anything like that. So where did she get her inspiration from? I always asked her, and the only thing she says was that she went to the library.
well,
She read books.
what a better place to go.
Well, that's where she got. You'll hear that from a lot of writers. I mean, quite a lot of writers will say, "I went to the library and I read books, and that's where I got my
Yeah.
inspiration from."
Yeah, you do hear that quite a lot when you speak to the authors and things, and it does seem to be it does seem to be a place that does spark the kind of creative thoughts a little bit of people looking maybe kind of with an interest in writing and things like that.
Yep.
It is for sure, for definite. I had the pleasure of meeting your mum actually at Motherwell Library where she did an event for us with her book Stars Shall Be Bright. But you guys worked together to write another book, White Feather, which kind of set in a similar period and things like that. That must have been quite a special thing for you guys to work on a book together after.
Oh, it was amazing. We'd always said, "Oh, let's write a book together." But then what happened was we were sitting around my mum's kitchen one Sunday morning, having a cup of coffee, eating a roll, and suddenly we just came up with this idea out of nowhere. We were talking about anniversaries. I think, what anniversaries are coming up that we could tie in a book with if we were writing one together? I think that was it. And then we came up with this because it was 2018. Was the 100th anniversary of the end of World War One. So we thought, why don't we write something not about World War One, but about the aftermath? What happens after, like, all the troops come home? And that's it. Suddenly, in the space of 20 minutes, we'd come up with a treatment for a book. And that's where it started, in 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's great to hear how that can. I mean, that's amazing how that kind of process can kind of happen so quickly like that. And obviously, then would have to go and flesh it out a bit more, obviously. But it's fantastic, and it must have been a great experience to kind of be able to kind of create something together as well.
Yeah, it was fun. Although my mum did tend to go off, and being my mum, I would come home at night, and at that point I still had a proper job. So I would come home at night and go, right, I'm going to get into writing this chapter. I'm really going to look forward to it. And I'd phone up my mum and she'd go, oh, I've already written it. What? That was my bit. I was going to write that bit because we were going to write a chapter each and then swap it over. So that was my mum.
I was going to ask actually, because the idea of writing a book together, it does sometimes kind of baffle me a little bit about how you go actually about doing that. Because obviously, if it's just yourself, you can kind of sit down and come up with the characters, come up with the story. But you obviously kind of have to have a bit of conversation, I suppose, or like you do one chapter, I'll do the next one kind of idea, or something to kind of how you go about kind of working on it together.
It was scenes mainly. We were talking about splitting up the scenes and then swapping them over, or important points, and then kind of filling out from there. But it is interesting. What we came up with was something that wasn't quite one of her books, and it wasn't quite one of mine. So it was something different. And we actually did two books together. We did another one, but it was after my mum got sick. So we'd done the synopsis and the treatment before she got sick, and then we got commissioned for it. So that one was me writing the book, mainly, the actual book, but it was based on the idea that we both came up with.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great to hear that you can manage to kind of have those kind of moments together, especially obviously that must have been kind of a bit of a difficult time as well.
Yes.
And stuff. So that's kind of nice to kind of you've got that. Let's go back a little bit to your own writing and to Thorfinn himself, which for anyone who's read any of the books will know he's possibly one of the most adorable Vikings I think you would ever come across. Where did the inspiration come from for that?
Partly me, because when I was about Thorfinn's age, I was insanely polite. I went to a really rough school back then in the sort of 1980s, early 1990s in Greenock in the west of Scotland. I didn't go to like private school or anything like that. I went to a regular kind of comprehensive school, and there were a lot of right characters in that school. See, when we used to go out, just an example, we used to go out and play football at break time. I used to apologize to people before I tried to tackle them. You can imagine how that went down. And obviously I never got very many tackles in either, giving people some forewarning. So that's how polite I was. So Thorfinn was kind of based on me. But I mean, the other thing I suppose was the idea of the juxtaposition between these comedy barbarians with the huge beards who shout a lot and jump in feet first, and then this polite Viking who's the complete opposite. And the two of those things clashing together like huge fists. are what drives the stories. And I've managed to get 8 Thorfinn adventures. All of them are driven by that basic clash between. That's how you drive stories. When I'm talking to kids about how to drive stories and come up with new ideas, if you have a clash like that, that really generates lots of sparks, because I've got an inexhaustible amount of ideas and scenarios as to what would happen if Thorfinn and the Vikings came upon this, or what if this happened or that happened. Many of them have made it into print. So that key juxtaposition was the another main driver for the story.
Yeah, and I just love how he's such a positive character and amongst a band of raiding Vikings who, like you say, are just out there to sort of cause mayhem. And you've done such a great job of making them so fun to read as well, because they're such a fantastic read and they're very funny. I think I was rereading it recently just to kind of remember a few things for this, and it's and they are just even as me as an adult reader it, they're just very funny books.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, are written for I'll be honest here, for dads and mums like yourself to read to the kids in funny voices, hopefully, and then maybe for kids to pick up and read themselves, a bit later on once they get a bit more advanced in the reading. But the funny thing you'll notice about the books, most books you read, the main characters, they change from the beginning to the end. Thorfinn never ever changes. He is resolutely polite. He is like in some ways he's a two-dimensional character, because he doesn't change. He's just the same the whole way through the series. And the Vikings too, they never change. What does change in those books is the secondary characters. So for example, in the book that you mentioned, the Thorfinn and the Rotten Scots, there's a character in there called Ranald MacRanald, who is a fierce Scottish chieftain who wants to be as tough as the Vikings, and sort of by the end of the book he's reduced to this cringing wreck by Thorfinn's politeness.
Yeah, and they try so hard to break him, and there's no way it's going to happen. It's fantastic. It's such a great read. And one of the other series is that you're also very well known for is the Top-Secret Grandad, in which the Grandad is a ghost. And was there any inspiration there whenever you were from your job as a ghost tour guide, or was that kind of just happened to be a ghost story you decided to write?
Well, it was more about I wanted to write a detective story for kids, but it was all about sidekicks, really, because I thought about this kid detective, and I thought about sidekicks. I was brought up, back when there were only like 3 TV channels, and the summer holidays, the long summer holidays, and you sit down and you watch and you turn on like BBC Two, and the only thing showing is this ancient black and white movie of Sherlock Holmes, with Basil Rathbone and who's the guy who played Dr. Watson? Was it Nigel Green or something like? I can't remember his name, but he was this dottery old fool. And so it was mainly about sidekicks. I thought about a sidekick, and I thought about a funny sidekick. So I came up with a ghost granddad, because I thought, well, a ghost could be quite good. It's sneaking around and finding stuff out. But alternatively, it could be really bad. I mean, if my granddad was a sidekick, I mean, he'd just go around complaining about his feet all the time and the price of stuff. So, you've got these two things that, again, go into the mix and provide a bit of a comic oomph to the story. And that was mainly where the kind of inspiration for that came from.
Yeah, and it's fantastic because the sort of difference between like that type of story and obviously the Viking one, it's completely different time periods and stuff like that. So it kind of captures sort of lots of different themes and stuff like that as well. Your latest book as well is an amazing illustrated atlas of Scotland, which is full of fantastic facts from all across Scotland. It's a very beautiful book as well. The illustrations and are fantastic. I'm assuming there was a lot of research had to go into that. And where did the idea behind that book come from?
Yeah, indeed, there was a lot of research, and Anders Frang's illustrations are, absolutely fabulous, and the humor in them, that it really adds to it. But I think a couple of years ago, we felt that what Scotland really needed in the bookshops was an atlas, just an atlas of Scotland, which was written and designed and illustrated and printed and published here. So that's what we've got with the Atlas of Scotland. And it came quite a lot from my own tour guiding experience, because not only did I used to be a tour guide, I used to take tourists around Scotland and show them the sights. And I've always had this child's eye view of things. I still do. I mean, maybe my wife would say it's probably because my sense of humor has not really evolved beyond the age of 9. So when I go around places, I look for things that I would find interesting, which generally tends to be what a 9-year-old child would find interesting. Take, for example, if we go to a castle, I am not remotely interested in stuffy old drawing rooms and china and crockery and all that stuff. I'm interested in dungeons, and I'm interested in ghosts. So I'll go to the dungeons first. I'll maybe look at like suits of armor and weaponry and armor and all that stuff. But what I'll also do if I go to old castles is I'll go up to, the old guys that stand around like they're custodian, but they're usually employed by Visit Scotland or something. I go up to one of them and I ask them if the place is haunted, if they've seen any ghosts. See, they know. They lock up at night. So they generally know. And I go round, and that's what I do when I go into places. So I look for stuff like ghosts. I look for myths and legends and funny stories. And so the Atlas is focused mainly on stuff that I found interesting, hopefully, which a child would also find interesting. And it cuts out a lot of the other stuff that maybe an adult would find interesting. So, for example, like there's a museum in Orkney. Sorry, no, it's not Orkney, it's Shetland. And one of the things I found most interesting about it is that they've got a massive, massive lump of butter that was buried in a peat bog. They used to pay it as tax to like the Norwegian king. They used to pay tax in butter. So some poor serf or peasant had dropped this massive tax payment in butter into a peat bog. And it stayed there for hundreds of years until somebody dug it up. So there's now in a museum this massive lump of butter. You can just go and stare at it. So I've ignored everything else that is of interest in that museum, which there's quite a lot, for the lump of butter. So that tends to be the angle that I take with the Atlas.
See, I think that would be the kind of thing that would probably catch my eye as well if I went to a museum like that. Like, such a random thing to find in a museum, a big lump of butter. It does. I mean, the Atlas, it covers all Scotland with some great facts, and I'm sure it'll interest adults just as much as children as well. Was there any particular facts in it that you found interesting when you were researching it, other than the lump of butter?
Yeah, well, loads and loads actually, but the hardest section to write was probably the section on Orkney, the Orkney Islands. I mean, I love Orkney, but these Atlas spreads, I mean, I really only had space for maybe 10 little facts. And editing was really important because I had to get each one down below 50 words. So it was a real challenge to fit everything in. And the thing about Orkney is, even if you take out everything else, the Neolithic history, the Stone Age history in Orkney is amazing. I mean, the stuff that was going on there during the Stone Age was, I always take Skara Brae, for example, which is this ancient village. It was uncovered after a storm in the 1860s, I think. This village was in use for hundreds of years, and it fell out of use before the Great Pyramid at Giza was even a glint in a pharaoh's eye. And I mean, this village is amazing. You can go and you can see the beds that Stone Age children would have slept in, curled up perhaps in the sheepskin rugs. You can see they've got the little dressers where they used to put their knickknacks. They had lockable front doors. They had wee utility rooms. They had a wee tank in the middle of the floor that they think they used to keep live seafood in. So, like, if they, how nowadays, if you want a movie night, you would say to your like mum or dad, let's get the popcorn on and we'll put on Netflix. Well, they used to do it back then, 5,000 years ago. They just used to whip some like prawns out of the seafood tub, and they could whack them on the stone griddle, and before you knew it, they had wasn't popcorn, but it was the same difference, really. So I think Orkney was the most interesting thing.
I wonder what the 5,000 year ago equivalent of Netflix would be.
Probably some old guy with a beard standing up telling stories.
Yeah, probably something like that. Yeah, fantastic. One of the things that stood out for me really was with things like this, the Stoorworm at Orkney and Nessie at Loch Ness and the Kelpies and Falkirk. Us Scots do seem to like a little bit of a myth or legend, a bit of a mystery monster of
Oh,
some sort, don't we?
yeah, and it's what I'm interested in more than anything. And looking around Scotland, as you know, not only as a tour guide, but as an author writing this book, one of the things that really, really interests me is how these myths and legends come about and how the landscape kind of inspires them. So, for example, you've
Yeah.
got like the island of Staffa off the west coast with these. It's a volcanic island, so they've got these hexagonal basalt columns. It's made up of these hexagonal basalt columns. And then you've got the Giant's Causeway just over the Irish Sea,
Mm-hmm.
which is made up of the same hexagonal basalt columns. And at some point in history, the early Scots, whoever they were, who were a sea people after all, across the Irish Sea, they came up with this legend about this Irish giant building a bridge to go across and fight a Scottish giant. And Scotland is full of those legends, you know, like not far away up in Lochaber, there's a place called Glenroy, and they've got these, if you go up the glen, they've got these parallel lines that run across the hillsides and the top of the glen, and it looks really weird. So back in the Dark Ages, people had no idea what they were. Nowadays, a geologist could tell you that they were just shorelines or different shorelines from an ice age loch. But back then, they didn't know that. So they came up with a legend, and that legend was it was Fingal's hunting roads. So Fingal would ride out with his, you know, why not?
And their version's way much more interesting than the different shorelines.
And then you've got like Corryvreckan, the second largest whirlpool in the world, which is in Scotland, this massive whirlpool near Jura, and you can hear it from miles around. So the people came up with a legend that it was the Celtic goddess of winter doing her washing.
Oh wow!
And that is just brilliant. I love how they come up with these legends, which are almost quite mundane. Somebody doing their washing, it just happens to be a Celtic goddess, you know.
Yeah, it's one of the great things about Scottish history and or myths and legends is these little stories about these things, and I think it kind of shows the sort of the storytelling heritage a bit of Scotland as well.
Yes.
You know, it's something that we've always been quite proud of and had as part of our heritage as these stories.
And you know what's really interesting, Chris? I go around schools and libraries talking about the Atlas. I'm doing a lot of talks about the Atlas just because it's not long come out. And I like to ask kids. I like to ask kids about myths and legends. Do you have any myths and legends in your area? You know, stories, funny wee stories. You have ghost stories, perhaps, around your... And everywhere I go, I get them.
Yeah, there's always one.
You might get blank faces to begin with, but within the space of a few minutes, they're all putting their hands up and they've got wee stories and legends to tell you about their own area, no matter where it is.
Yeah, we actually did a podcast late last year, I think it was, with Alison Gilbraith, the storyteller, and she had written a book, and I always get the title wrong. It's either the Folk Tales of Lanarkshire or Lanarkshire Folk Tales. I'm not sure which way around it goes. But she's got some kind of tales from nearby, and she had one that was kind of part of something that I remember whenever I was a kid, because I grew up in a little village in Lanarkshire called Salisbury. And there's a hill that I was always told there was a giant buried underneath the hill, and that was him.
Yeah.
And there was actually a myth, like she had the myth of the story about this giant in her book, which was really fantastic. And it was good to hear a little bit more about kind of background as to where that myth had came from and stuff like that in her book. It's great, and like you say, somebody always has some kind of story. I think whenever you look back at it, and it's great that they pass down generations too, and that they kind of survive. You know, it's a good thing. But later this year, you are following up the Atlas a little bit with another Atlas full of facts about Scottish history. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, we could have written 4 atlases with the amount of material that I came up with for the first atlas. I mean, pages and pages of stuff, and many of it I was just jotting down from memory. I mean, a lot of the work involved was like filtering stuff out and then editing what I had down to quite a small number of words. So that was quite hard work. But the actual ideas, the material I had, the base material, it was pages and pages of stuff that we couldn't fit in. So we could have written 4 solid atlases. So the next one is just about history. It's slightly different. So it's not broken down by geographical spreads. It's going to be focusing on little historical vignettes. So, for example, like Mary, Queen of Scots' supper room in Holyrood Palace is the focus for the page, which is about Mary, Queen of Scots. We can squeeze a lot of stuff in. And again, we've got Skara Brae coming up for the Stone Age. So focusing on that to talk about the Stone Age and what life was like for kids back then. But that should be a really interesting thing to take out and about. I'll be doing that a lot in the second part of the year.
Yeah, and if you have seen the atlas that's out just now, I'm sure it'll be a great follow up for anyone who's already kind of looked at the original one. Which, because it's if you're already a fan of the first one, I'm sure you've got lots of facts to come up with this in the follow up as well. When is that due out?
That's due out in September. I think September the 7th. That's coming out. And I'm hoping maybe to do a few more atlases. I mean, I've got so many more ideas, like stuff like mysteries and UFOs, and I could just go on and on. I could do a whole series of atlases.
Yeah, well, if the facts are there, why not?
Why not?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. It sounds like a great idea, and I'm really looking forward to catching the new one when it comes out. After picking up the one that's out just now as well, I'm sure it'll kind of capture my little boy's imagination as well, because I think that's one of the great things as well about the fact that you've kept the facts all quite short as well. They're kind of very easy for people to kind of remember them and kind of just get the kind of bare bones of what it is, which is
making it accessible. I think is a great thing for many kids, and no matter what age you're at. I mean, my daughter is that she's now onto Bunny versus Monkey and stuff like that. She has suddenly taken on, these books are lovely and they're really funny and they're accessible and everything. And I've seen a lot of kids turn round from non-readers through these graphic novels into readers. So I've taken a little bit of that as well into the brevity and the easiness and the accessibility in the Atlas books,
and I think it works very, very well. Finally, the last thing that I did notice on your bio in the Thorfinn book was that you live on a diet of cream buns and zombie movies, and I'm a big, huge fan of Cinnabon and 28 Days Later, so I wanted to find out what your cream bun of choice was, and if you have any particular favourite zombie movie that you would recommend for anyone to watch out there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. Well, you can't go wrong with a cream horn, a little bit of jam in it. I mean, I'm obsessed with jam. I mean, it's really annoying because my kid comes back from school and I said, "Do you want a piece of jam every day?" No, I don't. What is wrong with children these days? They don't like a piece of jam.
Wow, I don't know.
And as for zombie movies, I'd go back to the original Dawn of the Dead, George A. Romero. With the shopping mall. I think what I liked about George A. Romero is that there was no messing around, and he always he was always making a dig at society. There was always a satirical point to his zombie movies. It wasn't just for no reason. He was having a dig at commercialism and consumerism in that film, and I really liked that one. That was probably my favorite.
I don't know if it's something you'll see, and I'm not really sure if they're classed as zombies or not, but have you heard The Last of Us, the one that was based on the game?
Yeah.
I thought that was a fantastic one, because and one of the things that I love about that story is how they kind of explain it in a way that kind of makes it seem as if it's actually potentially possible. And which adds infinitely more frightening.
Yeah, there was some really good scenes in that one. The mushroom zombies coming out of the hole was a really good bit. That was quite good. I never thought I'd enjoy watching a TV program about mushroom zombies. That was really something. So I did like that one as well.
Yeah, that was definitely one of my kind of more recent favourites, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
But thank you, David, for coming in and telling us a little bit more about your books and your writing and things like that sort of stuff. And I hope that the launch of the new atlas goes really well, and I really hope you end up doing the UFO atlas as well later on after that.
You're more than welcome,
fantastic
Chris.
addition. So thank you for that, and it's been great talking to you. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
You're very welcome. So thank you very much, David, for joining me on the podcast. It was a great pleasure to get a chance to speak to you and relive a little bit of memories as well with you from whenever we met up at View Park Library. I hope everyone has enjoyed listening to that. And if you haven't heard or read any of David's books before, do get a chance to pick someone up. They are fantastic, and you'll enjoy them whether you're an adult or a child. They are fantastic reads, and they are very, very funny and full of great facts as well, the new atlas as well. So it's a great book to pick up and read, and I thoroughly recommend the Thorfinn books as well. It's such a great character. That's about all for time for us now, guys. Just before we go, we'll tell you a little bit about some activities that we've got going on in the libraries. We do have some new sessions starting for code clubs, so do look at those to see if there is any space for them if you want your little kids to get involved in code club. We also do have a creating writing class happening at Coatbridge Library as part of New Tricks. There was one on Monday this week already, and there's a new one on May 15th as well at 2 p.m, and you can sign up to come along to that too. And finally, the other thing that we're going to mention is that we do have a new playlist for life playlist for you to submit a song to. We are doing a spring flavoured one to get in the middle of the fact that spring's here, summer's soon coming along. And if you've got a song that really kind of springs to mind with that in mind, you can submit a song and we will add it to our spring to summer playlist. So you can find out about that on the cultural.co.uk website as well, and submit your entry to that. And then don't forget to like the playlist. You can also find it on Spotify as well for you to kind of listen to at a later date. You can follow us to kind of catch up with others and watch out for more coming in the near future too. That's all for us for now, guys. If you have enjoyed this podcast, don't forget you can leave us some feedback using hashtag FLB podcast or drop us a wee email to librarypodcast@northland.gov.uk. And we will be back very, very, very soon with more episodes soon. So that's all for now, guys. Bye for now.